Alright, how you guys doing? So pretty much like imagine yourself back as like a kid, Saturday morning or even Sunday night watching your favorite cartoons. Like I'm pretty sure everybody here like enjoyed cartoons as a kid or even to this day watching it on like Netflix or Hulu. And there's something about like cartoons like with just a fictional character that makes them seem so alive that like you almost like remember their voices and stuff. And it's just pretty much like with every single face that you see right here, there's always a face behind it. That someone is the voice of a character. And this is even just the characters of The Simpsons. So it's just pretty much, so today I'd like to explain to you guys like the ingenuity and what everything goes into voice acting pretty much. So with voice actors, you can go up to one voice to about 26 voices. And this is just from The Simpsons. So somebody like Dan Castellaneta that does voices like Homer Simpson or something like that has 26 voices in The Simpsons alone, but it probably works on many other shows with much more characters. And you also have another couple more big stars that do a lot of voices as well. So a thing that voice actors pretty much say is to be a voice actor, you have to be an actor. Right? So a guy like Dan Castellaneta, like mentioned before, who does the voice of Homer, you can see him here in an internet. It was pretty much an internet movie where he's some crazy guy with a gun, pretty much. This guy right here, he's Nolan North. He does a lot of video game voice acting and stuff. And he's here seen in an episode of Modern Family, which is out right now. And even someone like Mark Hamill, who's also seen in a lot of like Star Wars movies, he's Luke Skywalker pretty much. He's also actually really big into voice acting. He's seen in like a lot of video games and cartoons and stuff. And he's seen as like almost a bigger star in, well almost, but a bigger star in voice acting than he is in the Star Wars series. And one thing that gets kind of confused with people like looking at voice actors is voice actors don't write. They don't have the power of what they say pretty much. So this I'm pretty sure you guys seen this cartoon where it's the little guy naming all of the countries in the world. It's like really creative and stuff, but the guy who's pretty much sang the song of all the countries, he didn't write it at all. Like of how like all the countries kind of like rhyme together. His job is just to look at the script and do it however the directors and writers want the cartoon to kind of flow. And just looking at this picture right here, you can probably already like hear the voice of the fatality in your head. And even something as small as this of playing a video game, you just get that little sound bite. It has someone behind it. So there's a voice actor for that, and everything else like with little sound bites like that. So like, and it kind of like surprised me about learning this, but games like the sports games and stuff where you have like the broadcasting team, like while you play a video game, isn't taken from actual games. It's actually the people who like record live games had to go into the studio and record like hours and hours of just sound bites so the video game can play sound bites of like the in-game thing of when you make like a touchdown or something like that. And everything is heavily like mixed and mastered. This isn't the job of the voice actor at all. But something like the fatality, if they found the raw sound bite and it literally just sounded like if anybody else in the room right now tried to do the fatality voice. It didn't sound like demonic or anything, but they would just grab that, just some random person to say that, and say, add a lot of reverb, a lot of effects to it, and it would sound almost like genuine almost. So you don't really have to have a certain type of voice. They can pretty much change your voice in a way to fit certain things. And with voice actors, they usually do sessions of recording to 4 to 6 hours, so it's like a normal job pretty much, and it's usually like about 10 hours, but you do like 4 to 6 hours, and these guys are pretty much professionals. They like tune up their voices to where you know, like something like cartoons or video games, you have to scream a lot, but they have a certain type of screaming where it sounds genuine, but doesn't do a lot of damage to their throat, so they wouldn't lose their voice, like, for the next day for recording. And these guys, with the 4 to 6 hours, it might not be so much. They would probably do like another job where it's a totally different series or anything, overlapping like on the same day. So like someone like Dan Castaneda could do Homer Simpson one day and go to a, you know, and then finish his shift and go to the next studio and do a totally different character. So these guys, they do a lot of work and you do really good, you make a lot of money. But for someone like, at the bottom, for someone like reading ebooks or something like that, or those sports broadcaster guys, you only make about $30,000 a year. But if you're someone like Dan Castaneda, who's starring like a really hit like TV show, like cartoon or anything, you can go up to clear up to $400,000 an episode. And this isn't just for like, this is like your wage or something, because something like the $400,000 an episode, that would be like for The Simpsons, but then you could also do a different cartoon on that same year or something. So you can make even more money off of this. And same thing with the $30,000 a year. That's what he's paid for by a company to read ebooks or do the sports or something. But he can get a completely different job while being in this one. And thank you guys. It's my turn too.
All right, Shohei, what did you think?
So Brandon had a really nice introduction, and he had a really good explanation of what voice acting is, and also he had a good visual aid of the voice actors, and he also made a good point that voice actors don't write; they just read the script and explain how the recording works, like how they edit and stuff, and they explain the time spent on one recording. Like 6 hours and stuff, and he had a good statistic about what the voice actors salary.
All right, the greeting and the visualization at the beginning I thought was okay as an attention device. You do identify what your topic area is going to be. I'm not exactly sure what it is you're going to say about this topic. I did like the fact that you tried to talk about why this is important for all the characters in the different shows, and you could potentially do lots of different voices. It made it sound like though there was a range. What you really meant was that there's a range on that one particular show of one person doing one voice and one person doing 26 voices. I imagine that people could potentially do even more than 26 voices. That's not the top upper limit. That just happened to be on that one show. But the way you presented it, it made it sound like, well, you know, there's a maximum. You can do 1 to 26 voices. And I don't think that's really what you mean there. I think that the main problem that I saw with the presentation was that there's not really an organizational pattern. There's a lot of information, which I like. The information's interesting. You usually have a good picture to go along with it or diagram, but it's all just a random, here's another piece of information, here's another piece of information. It's not organized in any particular way that I could make out. I could maybe impose an organization on it, but you should be the one who's doing that. So talking about the range of voices that you might have on a singular show, for instance, and then talking about the main actors and their roles, the main voice actors and their roles on different shows. Maybe that would be another point. And then the third point being the way in which they create the acting performance by going into the studio and modifying it and going through that whole process. I think there's a way to maybe make it fit into a structure. And then you can move some of the other things around to fit into those categories. For example, when you're talking about the different actors, that could be where the salary range thing fits into, instead of having it be a separate piece of information. It just, like I said, it just felt like it was organized around pieces of information as opposed to ideas or main concepts. And it was good information, and I thought it was enjoyable, but it's not necessarily easy to digest, and it'll be a little bit harder to remember. The visuals are okay. To me, the one that was the most meaningful and useful was the one with all the voice actors and the character parts that they do on The Simpsons, and you can see the range that's going on there, just the way you talked about it, the 1 to 26. Dan Castellaneta doing the 26 voices, and Marsha Wallace just doing the one voice there at the bottom, and all the other actors in between. It's done as a graph, and the nice thing about the graph is that it's all the characters that make up the bars there. I thought that was a good way to do that. Did you create that, or is that something somebody else did? Yeah, it's a nice thing. It works pretty well, illustrating the point that you're talking about, and I think you used it pretty well. Like I said, I think you're trying to turn that into the subject, and it supports the subject, but it's not the subject itself. And I think you get into that problem a little bit, like we talked about before. Your delivery is okay. I think you could be a little bit more energetic and enthusiastic about some of the things. It was a little strange to me. At one point you said, you could just take a random person's voice, anybody's voice, and put it into this equipment, and with the equipment you could change it. And well, if you can do that, why do they need all those voice actors? Why don't they just take random male voice and random female voice, run them through all of the mixers, and we create dozens of different voices? There's more to it than that. I need to know what that more to it is. It may have to do with what a director wants to be done. It's maybe easier to give directions to an actor than it is to program the computer or adjust the sound mix on something. There may be characteristics that are hard to reproduce with the machine that are distinctive to the character. Timing issues. I don't know. There's probably a good reason to do this, because if electronically we can do all this, the voice actor will disappear within a short amount of time, I would think. And I don't think that that's the impression that you were giving us. So there's a little bit of inconsistency there with that piece of information. All right, thank you. We'll stop there. We've already